Welcome to another episode of Between the Cracks, the podcast where we do casual conversations around tea. My name is Dart, and today I'm joined by...
Hello. It's Derek from Our Tearoom and Our Teaware.
Starting off today in the warehouse, we had some cool stuff, cool exchanges that we did this week. Derek was in Jingdezhen. While he was in Jingdezhen, I was talking with people here in the U.S. Got some sample matcha in from Johnny Matcha. He sent us over some of the, I'm pretty sure it's the Goko, which is the same one that I have from Caitlin from Dear Tico. So I'll be interested to compare those back to back. And there's a couple interesting things that he does that's different than any other matcha producer or matcha seller that I've seen. So interested in those. And we also have Dwayne's Pots that I was talking to basically about how I don't really have any cool mugs, and we don't really have any cool mugs with Our Teaware. And I have all these amazing teapots. When it comes to my mugs, I just have like Walmart mugs, and I don't know. It's kind of lame. So it might be something coming down the track for that too.
Where's Johnny Matcha at?
Yeah, Johnny's here in the States. He had a pretty cool reel. He was just in Tennessee trying out some kind of roasting boba a couple weeks ago.
the matcha is in Tennessee matcha, right?
No, it's not. No. He gets it from Japan. He's got like cool videos like with him and his producers like in Japan. And I think his story goes back to like 2013 or 2014 where he just wanted matcha and it took forever to get. And I mean, you can empathize with that too. 10 years ago in the US, like any high grade tea just took a long time to get here. It wasn't easy.
I mean, that's how a lot of us get into the business. Eventually you just start collecting, buying for yourself, drinking for yourself, and then you realize you have way too much. And you're like, I have to start selling this.
Dwayne's a cool guy. He also is firing with Jonathan Steele, right? So Jonathan hung out with him in Seattle. Yeah, they're firing at Pleasant Hill, next weekend together.
So he also does wood fire up there?
Yeah, so he does straight wood, he does wood and soda, and he does electric. The cups that I may or may not have one on the way is one of his blue electric fired pieces that he kind of uses the blue and white glaze to look like a mountain range, like a glacial mountain range.
Ooh, nice.
Those are electric fired at I think cone 6 he said for those, but super cool. He has the mini mugs, which to me are like more like mate or like, you know, not quite espresso. They're not that small, but like definitely like closer to gong fu than, you know, oversized 32-ounce tea mug.
I was laughing at Cone 6 because I went into like the ceramic university in Jingdezhen. I was asking them like about their kilns and what they fire at, how they measure the temperatures over time. And they're like, oh yeah, like, yeah, we've used cones before. And I'm like, yeah, but you guys don't like, and they're like, not really. I mean, you just tweak it here and there. It's mostly electric here. So it's just like, you just up the temp, up the time. So I was like,
with electric kilns, they are more consistent, but I still think that's funny that in like the porcelain capital of the world, they're like, yeah we just kind of do it by feel, you know, up it here, up it there. Like
I've still never seen a cone here in China. Anyways, yeah, so that's really cool to get some of those mugs. Those are going to be the handled mugs, right?
Yeah, just like a traditional like coffee mug, but it's just like a mini size, like I think 8 ounces or 12 ounces, something like that.
Actually, when I was in Jingdezhen, I saw Ye Chao pulling some handles for some mugs for a friend. He says it's so convenient living in Jingdezhen because all the potters can help each other. If you need something specialized done, you just a call away, a drive away. Somebody can come over, help you pull a bunch of handles. I think he pulled like 25 handles and then just left. So just like running a little errand with him.
That's so funny. Handles are a very pulling handles is a very like phallic activity. It's kind of a weird, like when you watch people, it's just like
get that water on it and it's kind of like milking a cow, you know.
But that's cool. That's just like, stopping for groceries, stopping to pull 20 handles for a friend today.
Yeah, no, it's like I went out to lunch. We dropped his kid off at school, then went and pulled some handles, then went back to the studio. Like,
nice.
All in the part of the day. That'll be cool because honestly, like I do like the handles. Just a nice mug with a handle. I drink coffee every now and then, so
yeah,
I'm a sucker for it.
One last thing to mention here in the warehouse, we only have like 3 or 4 of the acquired tastes left. This was our first piece of Qinghua that we got, right? The blue and white porcelain. While we are getting some really, really cool stuff that Derek will talk about later, we're going to be replacing the acquired taste with something else. So if you like the acquired taste, make sure you go pick one up because I think I only have, like I said, 3 or 4 left in stock and we're not going to be carrying those again.
Those are really nice pieces. Just very simple, have like a modern take on the Qinghua. I don't know. I liked them a lot.
Derek, what's our theme for today? What are we talking about?
I've already talked about it quite a few times. It's my trip to Jingdezhen and just kind of the experiences, what we wanted to get, what was on the wish list, the bucket list, and what we actually acquired.
Yeah, and I feel like we turned it on its head a little bit. Like there was some things that we weren't looking to get at all and found like some of the craziest connections for, and some of those things we were looking for that just for whatever reason didn't work out. But we'll get into that too, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a lot of adapting. We're going and looking for specifically one thing, can't find it, and then find something else instead. So you just have to keep an open mind when you do these sourcing things. If you guys listen to the Tea Soup podcast, you know all about my sourcing techniques, and we'll kind of talk about that here as well, because we saw the different levels of luck manifesting.
For sure. And I think even though we had specific things we were looking at, we still knew the range of what we could find. And obviously we still got things that were like in the range of Jingdezhen ceramics that we still needed a baseline for to make those decisions for the things that we did pick up, you know, higher levels of luck.
Let's get into actual nitty-gritty details here. What were we looking at? What specifically were we looking for that we didn't find?
So the top of the list was something really cool painted. Jingdezhen is it's white porcelain, right? So it's a beautiful canvas, but we wanted some really modern, cool art. And we saw a few things, but just nothing that really kind of everything lined up for us.
Yeah, because one thing we've seen from a lot of the stuff coming out of Jingdezhen right now, a lot of the modern stuff, is it has really interesting mix of like old Chinese porcelain and then modern art on it. We realized like, oh, painting, as Dart said, is just a canvas for actually painting. And so we were looking for somebody who can do this high quality painting, this really interesting painting with a really artistic idea in mind.
Yeah.
And that was hard to find.
But want to talk about the one where they wanted us to like literally give them the art?
I found a studio that was doing some pretty cool hand painted stuff. Cool designs. I really, really liked it. I talked to them. The painter wasn't there. The person who runs the studio wasn't there. And so they gave me their WeChat so I could communicate with them. And I started asking them like, oh, do you have custom pieces? And they say, yeah, we can do custom pieces. What do you want? And I'm like, well, what do you have? And they're like, we can't show you what we have. And I'm like, okay. But you can't do custom pieces? And they're like, yeah, send me a design. And I'm like, what about this? And I sent them a few ideas and they're like, yeah, we're going to need more to go off of. And I'm just like, so we need to actually like make a mock-up cup and then they do it. I don't know.
It was very weird because typically like I want to like, you know, do a rough sketch or like an inspiration or something. And then like let the artist, like let their talent take over. So it was weird that they're like, no, give us the exact.
Yeah. Cause we gave them a rough sketch and they're like, well, that's going to be difficult to do. Like it might look different from how you want it. And all of the other hand painted stuff, it would seem very, very niche, where it's like they do this one specific style and this one thing on the teacups and teapots. I'm like, okay, that's your thing, but that's not necessarily our thing, right?
I think you've run into this and you've talked about it on Tea Soup a good bit about like running into different tea vendors that are a bit mafan. It's just like pulling teeth, right? It's like when something is just like, difficult, just like more work than it's worth, where you're like, dude, but why? Like we're trying to work with you. Like, why are you being adversarial? Like it's interesting.
I mean, some people just have different communication styles. I mean, you click with some people and you don't click with other people. Yeah. Like I remember like some of these white tea farmers I used to work with, like I'd ask them a question and they wouldn't answer my question, but then they would answer some random question I did not ask. And I'm just like, why are they telling me about this? And I never saw eye to eye with them at all. So again, it just happens. Different people, different clicks.
Let's go to the complete other side though, because you said there's some people we don't click with or you just don't click with. But we had one that we really did, and it was, I feel like, the gold mine of this trip.
This one was really cool. So this was like an old guy in a shop, just like sitting in the back painting. His shop was very mild, very modest. I walk in because I see like some kind of modern style Qinghua on like classical vases, classical shapes, and it's just very, very low key, subdued. So I walk in and I'm perusing it and start talking to this guy, and his name is He Jingchun. That's the same Jing as Jingdezhen. And he's Jiangxi level master in both ceramics and fine arts. And he's just so chill and down to earth. I would have never guessed it, but it's just like doing some research, like seeing his bio and everything. I'm just like, oh, wow, you're the real deal here. He's just a peaceful, happy, humble kind of guy who's really, really into researching how to do different styles of Qinghua. One of his famous things was doing this black ink on the white porcelain in that Qinghua style. I had been to a lot of Qinghua places, and a lot of them are doing the classic. Do you know what a classic Qinghua motif looks like?
The floral designs, or I don't know so much. I've talked to a few people about it, but I honestly don't know as much about like the significance and the difficulty, because I've heard like that the price is dependent on what like the motif is, and there's a connection with that and the history of it. But I don't know about each one like specifically too much on that.
A lot of times the classic Qinghua, it's really just a pattern. It's not like a It's not like a landscape. It's not
oh.
like a story. It's not, a
Right.
a poem or anything. It's just this interlapping pattern. As Dart mentioned, maybe it's floral, maybe it's otherwise. This kind of, in my mind, it dates back to, I think it's called like the Tao Ti, which is the really, really ancient Han Dynasty style of art back in like 200 BC, 1000 BC and stuff. You see it on a lot of the old styles of brass and pottery. And it's kind of a callback to that, I guess.
There's actually a pretty cool connection that reminds me of both the Ding Yao, which was the white porcelain, the famous white porcelain from the Song Dynasty, and the Suzhou porcelain as well, that they did black motifs, typically on vases, but it was that kind of traditional where, honestly, it almost reminds me similarly to like ancient Egyptian art, where it has like these bands above and below, and then some sort of design in the middle, and sometimes like a scene or something in the middle, but a lot of times it's just a pattern. And his work reminded me a lot of that, which is really cool because no one is doing it. Like no one is doing black on porcelain, and he's made his name on it.
So like I went to a lot of different places making the Qinghua, and they're all doing the classic traditional styles of this, blue ink on white porcelain in this classic designs. I get to his shop and he's doing something totally different. This is Shui Mo Hua, landscape ink painting in a classic Qinghua style, like in the colors, in the inks and everything. But this looks like a Chinese painting. And this is so unique in the world of what I was seeing.
One thing I really love about his signature too, as cool as like the stamping style is, I really like that it was literally his name in characters that he's written and Jingdezhen, right? Like it's like his name and Jingdezhen. To me, I don't know. It's just, it feels a little bit more personal than the stamp.
Oh yeah. He's handwriting all these characters. And another thing he always talks about is how difficult it is to do fine lettering on these Qinghua styles, right? And so he's using the thinnest brush here.
Remember when we called and you were in the studio and he was telling us about the different hairs from the different animals that has to be used for the fine brushes? Like, so cool.
That was nuts. Yeah, he had so many different brushes. He's like, okay, this is like lamb's wool. Like this one is like juvenile goat fur. I'm just like, you juvenile goat fur, huh? And he's like, that's why it's brown, and like bizarre skills that go into this. But again, he's a 2-level master. He's done that Jiangxi provincial level master twice, one in fine arts, then one in ceramics. He's a really cool guy. And he's just like showing me all the old techniques. Remember like when he was showing how to spray the paint onto the cup.
Yeah,
it's like,
the blow painted.
Yeah, the blow painted. He's like, before we just used to actually put it in your mouth and then blow the paint onto the cup. Now they have a specific tool. As Dart mentioned on the phone, he's like, oh, now you can actually just use an actual sprayer, right? You don't have to use this old technique. Really, really eager, excited about the artwork. And yeah, pushing the boundaries of it too. Like I said, I went to so many different Qinghua places. Nobody was doing this style of the Shui Mo Hua, this Chinese landscape painting, and nobody was doing black ink on white porcelain. And so his stuff was very unique. So I was able to get some of those pieces, really excited for it. Some of that black ink on white porcelain, some big jurenbeis. And another thing, Dart, here's a question for you. Another thing that he had was celadon, but his celadon looked a little different. It looked really, really pale, not super deep green. What's going on with that?
Similar to jade, a true celadon is actually going to be much more mild. So when you look at jade and the jade we think of in the movies that's super green, that's actually jadeite. And true jade, like a true celadon, the closer it is to white is actually the more accurate to the real and higher quality versions because they're not using any additive colors. So some of the other stuff that looks really green is very cool, but it actually doesn't meet the litmus test of being a celadon because it's not a reduced glaze that turns green.
One more time, say that again. It's not a reduced glaze that turns green. So true celadon should be fired in reduction.
Correct. True celadons are fired in reduction. And typically you start to see the colors, I think it's around 5%.
Very cool. So yeah, I was able to pick up some of his Qinghua jurenbeis, some nice, really cool, that classic style celadon jurenbeis. And yeah, he even gifted me this cup just because of the yuanfen, that karmic tie. And again, it's very special when you get gifted a cup because in Chinese, 一辈子, it sounds like a lifetime.
Yeah, 一辈, yeah. Beautiful. So cool. And this is it's so funny. A lot of the other stuff, because we already have Yue Chao. There wasn't a single wood-fired thing that you showed me that I was more impressed than Yue Chao's stuff. and they were more expensive. It was the same thing with Master He, where not only were his prices more reasonable to where they should be, because we kind of get a baseline, right? You get a baseline when you go and you know where prices should be. His prices were not only realistic, but then he also gave Derek a free cup. It's like, this is the type of person you want to be working with, not the guy who is like, well, you want custom? Send me the exact picture. And again, I hope he does well. It's nothing against them, but just the complete difference in that interaction.
And he was like, yeah, like I make all these pieces by myself. Like I throw on my paint on them, I fire them. Like I can put whatever price I want on them. And so it's just like, that was his reasoning for giving us like the better price, because he's like, you know what, I'm really excited to share this art style, because I was asking him all the questions. It was just a wealth of information, so we're really excited to learn more from Master He.
Not only did he have his certifications up and in the studio, which is cool, right? Just a good, like, nice starting point, but he also had, like, for each piece or each type of piece, this was fired at this temperature and a full description with a little placard. Like, he really cares not only about having the wares, but sharing the art, sharing the information, and that's what we're all about. So we just could not be more excited about Master He.
And so what's interesting is the way that I found Master He, this was the second or third level of luck by motion, luck by awareness, because I had just went to the Taoxichuan in Jingdezhen is like that modern place where they have like really nice galleries, really nice studios. Anyone who travels to Jingdezhen for fun usually stops by this like really modern place. They have nice bars, restaurants, cool stuff. And so I went there, got some drone footage, which we'll share soon. And then I was walking all the way back. I took the long route back. It was like 25 minutes, 30-minute walk just to see the town. I was walking back on the Porcelain Road and I came across his shop. One interesting thing about that is I was actually looking for a different shop when I found his. I was looking for the place we get our oxblood porcelain. Sorry, do you want to give an introduction to oxblood?
Oxblood is really cool. And actually, Master He talks a little bit about this. When you're firing porcelain at the temperatures you're firing it at, north of 1300 degrees Celsius, a lot of color actually gets stripped away. So if you have any colored glazes, it starts to peel away and peel off. The interesting thing about oxblood is it also, like Celadons, needs to be reduced. So because it's copper, it's green in oxidation and turns... Oh, wait, hold on. I have an example. So here's a really good example from Mark. So copper is green when it's fired in oxidation and turns red when it's reduced. So this wasn't reduced in the kiln. This was reduced in the kiln.
That's cool.
Yeah, so getting that evenness to get the whole thing red and then making sure that the glaze doesn't fall off, because it can like just shiver off, is extremely difficult. And so this oxblood is really cool because it's challenging to do, and the red, the depth in the red is absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah, and this is a studio we've been working with for the past year, a little over a year. I was going to visit their factory where they're actually firing all this stuff, but I just didn't have enough time. And one time we bought, a handful of cups, like 15 cups. She fires them, they come out, there's only a little bit of red in them. They're like mostly white.
Yeah.
And she's like, well, it's inconsistent, it's difficult to do, but it's like, it really is difficult to do. There are stories of like perfecting this glaze where there's just like a million pieces that are just shards and shards of just white porcelain, because as Dart says, and as Master He says with this, why it's so difficult to get these colors on it, the higher you fire it, the more risk you have for the colors, the ink just to fade off. Another cool example of this oxblood is the fact that this is a second. This is not the ideal piece. This fired a little inconsistently in the color. As you can see, it's not pure red with that white rim. The Chinese standard for a lot of these firing pieces is they want it perfect. In the West, we kind of appreciate... Yeah, in the West, we kind of appreciate the imperfections and how each piece is different. But in the factory, when they're making these, they look at them, they're like, nope, that fired wrong, throw it out. And so we're able to offer these pieces at a really cool, affordable price.
And we have some seconds coming from Yue Chao as well. It's funny because the pieces that Yue Chao offers as seconds, and we talked about this a little bit already, but the pieces he fires as seconds, other studios would just say, oh, it's part of the firing process. Not only did we get seconds, but we also had to establish a price because he didn't want to take the money for it. And again, we talked about this in the last episode too. It's a really cool opportunity where we don't see pottery getting thrown away that has very small imperfections, and we can offer it at a more affordable rate for you guys. So super excited about the seconds from the Yue Chao studio and the Oxblood studio as well.
Another really cool thing about this oxblood is its lineage. It was the imperial favorite style of porcelain for the Kangxi emperor.
Right. And this lines up perfectly in the Qing dynasty. So right after Emperor Zhu Yanzhang says, was loose leaf only. Yixing takes off, Jingdezhen blows up, and these two rise to their kind of peak, being the top of all pottery in China. And then they keep innovating with this oxblood and doucai in the Qing dynasty.
Do you know anything about the tribute porcelain that went to the Qing dynasty courts?
I know from the Ming dynasty on, every time there was a new emperor, they would get a new commission set of porcelain from Jingdezhen. I don't know if that's what you're talking about or if you're talking about something else.
I think that's it, because this was Kangxi's favorite, this oxblood color. And then his son's favorite from the same area, very, very similar kiln, is this Chayemo. Now, Chayemo, that's tea leaf ink.
Dude, that's cool looking, yeah.
It's really cool, man. It's this, again, this is a second from that same factory because it has a little bubble in the clay down here, or in the glaze, a little bubble at the bottom. But it's really cool to see these two different colors. It's almost Christmas time, so good to look at these green and red.
The green looks like it's pretty similar to Ruyao in the texture. Is it kind of that soft matte feel?
It's pretty soft, pretty matte, yeah. But it will not crack, I don't think.
Yeah. No crackling with those.
These are two really cool finds. This was a totally new find we didn't expect, but it fits right into the lineage of why we like the oxblood so much. Super cool.
All right, lightning round, Derek. We're getting close on time. What else do we have?
We have so much teaware from Chow coming in. I'm so excited. What you mentioned earlier, like I saw a whole lot of wood-fired stuff. Wood-fire is so popular in Jingdezhen right now that everyone's doing it. Yue Chao, he's been doing it since around, I think it was 2011, he moved to Jingdezhen and started doing that wood-fire stuff. He says wood-fire pottery first really began in Jingdezhen in 2008. The Le Tien tea factory started doing this wood-fired, and they started doing it every year. And a lot of this technology, the wood-fire technology, it came from abroad. It came from Japan. It came from America, because in Jingdezhen, he's saying at that time, they're doing these really classic, crisp styles. They don't need wood-fired stuff.
It makes sense with the Japanese Anagama kilns. I think a lot of the world takes influence from Japan for their wood firing. But interestingly enough, in Jingdezhen, you were telling me about this, right? We were talking about this, how whether it's the Liao brothers or Yue Chao, they're all firing in their own kilns. Right. So they're relatively small for wood-fired kilns, which is interesting to me because it really contrasts some of the old kilns in China. When they first started doing porcelain, they had these massive kilns for the emperors and things like that. Yeah, the dragon kilns, exactly.
Well, I mean, that's why he said like his kiln design came from America. Like he was like, I owe a lot to like the technologies coming out of there, because their tradition is really cool. West meets the East and then flows back and forth.
Super cool.
But yeah, so we have so much wood fire pieces coming from him. As Dart said earlier, I really love his style because he has such a high caliber of perfection to his pieces. Small minor defects, he's like, no, it's a second. You can just have this piece if you want. It was almost a litmus test going to other studios, and I'd see pieces with obvious defects, you know, like mouth shapes and like the clay and stuff, and they're like, oh, it adds value to it. It's the same price as the full piece. And I'm like, okay, Yue Chao would not necessarily do that unless it really did add value to it.
One thing that I hear a lot with people talking about gaiwans for new tea drinkers is you don't want a thin porcelain piece because you're going to burn your fingers. The higher quality the gaiwan, the less that is the case. My Dragon's Breath gaiwan is super, super thin. I have never even come close to burning myself because the lid fit is perfect. And when I line it up and bring my hand around it, I never even run close to running into that issue. On my cheaper porcelain one, right? I mean, this is basically the cheapest porcelain that you can get, right? The lid, see how it just kind of automatically off centers, and it's actually a little bit too big, like it's just a little bit. These are the small things that make all the difference in the world. And I think a cheap porcelain, you probably don't want a super thin one for your first one. With Yue Chao's, man, they're so thin, but I don't ever even come close.
That was an interesting thing I realized in Jingdezhen is like not everyone's a tea drinker there, right? Not everyone's drinking tea, making really useful teaware. Some place I went into, they make really beautiful ceramics. And then I see their gaiwans and I'm just like, that would burn my hand off. Like, what is the shape of the spout doing there? Like, what is the lid doing? And I'm like looking up their teapots, their gaiwans. None of it makes any sense, but they're just ceramic artists that moved here because they can sell ceramics. And so it was really interesting seeing that functional quality all coming together and kind of failing sometimes.
For Ultimatum today, we only have one question, but it's kind of a big one. So if you have a proper master cup, right? A Jurembe master cup, not just a single cup, but a one-of-a-kind piece, do you take the Qinghua or do you take the wood-fired?
This is a hard question because right here, this is a Jurenbei, wood-fired Jurenbei, some thick clay from Yuechao. And so Yuechao has really incredible detail, really incredible processing, and I love it. But recently, after holding one of these Qinghua pieces in my hand, oh my God, this feels like a mature master's piece. And even my Jiangsu tea master, all of his master cups, they're Qinghua. I don't know, I'm on the fence, man. I can't decide. What about you?
I think for me, for the Jurembe, I want that Qinghua. If it's a pour cup or a gaiwan, I think I might be more back and forth between them. It's incredible. Not that the wood-fired pieces aren't incredible, but the lightness, the fineness, the perfectness of the Qinghua is crazy.
It was funny. Yuechao asked me the same question. He's like, "Oh, do you like Qinghua?" And I said, the older I get, the more I like it." And he laughed. He's like, "That's what we say too." The older you get, the more you like Qinghua. Anyways, Dart, I have a few questions for you actually. So it's not necessarily ultimatums, but it's just kind of like stump the expert kind of questions.
All right. What do we got?
What the heck is Kaolin? I've heard it so much, like Kaolin Mountains, the purest Kaolin on planet Earth. Or sometimes you don't want pure Kaolin. What's going on?
Kaolin or kaolinite is the main component that we find in porcelain. So you want to have it pure, and that's really what makes it porcelain versus a stoneware. A lot of times when we talk about porcelain, we talk about it in terms of temperature, but really it's the purity of the clay or the kaolin that makes it a porcelain.
Interesting. So the higher the pitch, does that mean higher quality?
Not necessarily. Typically, that would mean higher fired. If you're talking about pure kaolin, it can be fired to a higher temperature. So in a vacuum, it can be fired higher, and so you could get a higher pitch. But you could also low fire your porcelain and high fire your stoneware to actually have a lower pitch porcelain and higher pitch stoneware.
Interesting. So that doesn't really help us out.
No, not really. The pitch is cool, but it's more of a cool party trick.
Another question I have, bone china. How much bone do you need to make this china?
So bone china was invented in Europe basically because they didn't have the right mixture in their kaolin, and Chinese porcelain had to be fired at a higher temperature. So they actually took and ground up animal bones so that it could be fired at a lower temperature. And it was also a more stable clay body that was easier to work with. So you didn't have to have as much skill, which is what we see in porcelain toilets and things like that. It's going to be cut bone china, not pure kaolin.
Interesting. So do they make bone china in China?
I don't know if they do now. I would not think in Jingdezhen, maybe in some of the cheaper, the acquired taste, right? This might be cut bone china, but I would be very skeptical that, a high quality master in Jingdezhen is using bone china, just like in Yisheng, right? Like those higher masters, they're using the reserves of the purest kind of finest clay.
Last question about Jingdezhen. I went to a few different studios and I bought some interesting wood fire masterpieces. This guy was making some really cool Jurenbeis, single cups with really thick, groggy clay. Like this does not look like porcelain. Why doesn't it look white? Do you know? You said it was Jingdezhen clay.
Clay is really hard to determine after the fact. Like there's things we can look at and see that give indications of what it is, but if they're mixing their own clay, it could be anything. They could mix it into a black body. It could be fired in reduction to make it black. It could be colored and painted black. The bottom of that wasn't painted. There's any number of reasons, so it's kind of hard to tell after the fact which of those it could be.
Is there a difference between like the Taozi clay and the porcelain clay?
Like Taoqi and Ciqi?
Right, Taoqi and Siqi. Because he said he told me like I was like, why isn't it white like porcelain? He's like, well, it's not porcelain, it's Taozi. And I'm like, but it's Jingdezhen clay.
China doesn't differentiate as much as we do in the West, and sometimes they actually use things interchangeably. Like they'll talk about celadons being with a porcelain body, but you can also have it with a white stoneware body as well. And they also don't use the term stoneware at all. So in China, it's a little bit more vague. Taoqi or Taozi is something that has a less kind of pure body by the look of it. Whereas porcelain, again, is that kind of like pure white. But again, you do have white stoneware. So it's not, there's not an exact science in English or Chinese. But typically, if it's white, people will say porcelain. If it's any mixture of other things, then it would fall under earthenware or Taoqi.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense. I see this all the time with the tea farmers where they're just using terms that I'm like, I don't think that's the right way to use that term. And they'll just throw it out. Like, oh, that's what we say here. And I'm like, okay.
You'll never see them say stoneware. Yixing, Chaozhou, Qinzhou, Jianshui, right? They'll just say Taozi. It's not wrong. It's an earthenware body is kind of what they're saying for it, which is fired at a temperature higher than what we would call earthenware in the US, but like it's all contextual. Cannot wait until this teaware gets to the US. I already have people messaging me, when is it going to be here? When is it going to be here?
Hopefully it'll be on the boat by the end of this month, next week or so.
Yeah, we also cannot wait. I can't wait to get one of Master He's Jurenbeis and the black and white and the blue and white and look at, it's going to be so much fun. So many cool reels. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Between the Cracks, and we'll catch you in the next one.